Good morning. My name is Eva Riebold, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm an older white woman with long gray hair that I wear up on my head, and I usually play the piano on Sunday mornings. One of my favorite activities is reading, and I exchange book ideas frequently with my friends. My former roommate in college, whom I saw recently after a long time, suggested Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's a distinguished teaching professor of environmental and forest biology and the director of the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment at State University of New York. She's a member of the Potawatomi Nation. Braiding Sweetgrass is partly a memoir and partly essays about Native American spiritual connections with plants. It's also about Native mythology, including the story of the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, and also about the Haudenosaunee Confederation and the Great Law of Peace, which many believe inspired the Constitution of the United States. Today, we are recognizing Native American Heritage Month, so I wanted to share the Great Law of Peace with you. Many hundreds of years ago, there were several Native American tribes living in what is now northeastern Canada and down into what is now the United States, the New York State area and around the Great Lakes, Ohio, and as far south as the Carolinas and west to the Mississippi and east to the Atlantic. They were called the Haudenosaunee. This means people of the longhouse. They lived in long, bark-covered longhouses that sheltered many families. They traced their heritage through the mother's bloodline and were organized into families, clans, and tribes. The women shared a balance of power with the men. For hundreds of years, there were several major tribal nations. The Mohawks called themselves the people of the Flint Country. The Onondaga, or people of the hills. The Cayuga, meaning where they land the boats. The Oneida, or people of the Standing Stone. And the Seneca, the people of the Big Hill. And later joining with them in 1722 were the Tuscarora Nation, or people of the shirt. Now, these nations had been in constant conflict with each other for hundreds of years. And then in about the 12th century, the great peacemaker and his spokesperson, Hiawatha, who was chief of the Onondaga, traveled around and talking to different tribes, promoting peace. Councils were called, and Hiawatha presented the Great Law of Peace to the 5 original tribes. In 1142, according to legend and to B.E. Johansen in his manuscript called Dating the Iroquois Confederation and Constitution was established. 1100s. I give acknowledgement, G. Murphy, Modern History Sourcebook. The French, being some of the first Europeans to arrive on the continent, had named them Iroquois. The editors of Encyclopedia Britannica call this group of nations the oldest living participatory democracy on Earth. Oldest living participatory democracy on Earth. So now I'm going to give you some of the similarities between the Iroquois Confederacy also called the Great Law of Peace, and the U.S. Constitution. The Iroquois Confederacy restricts members from holding more than one office, as in Article 1, Section 6, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution. 2, the Confederacy outlines the processes to remove leaders, as does the U.S. Constitution in Article 2, Section 4. 3, it designates 2 branches of legislature with procedures for passing laws, as in Article 1, Section 1. 4, it delineates who has the power to declare war, as in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, or the War Powers Clause in the U.S. Constitution. It creates a balance of power between the Iroquois Confederacy and the individual tribes, similar to the differing duties assigned to the 3 branches of the U.S. government: legislative, executive, and judicial. In 1744, the Onondaga chief, Casanatego, gave a speech urging the 13 colonies to unite, to not disagree, to preserve friendships and become stronger. I quote him, "We are a powerful confederacy, and by your observing the same methods our wise forefathers have taken, you will acquire fresh strength and power. Therefore, whatever befalls you, never fall out one with another." Close quote. Casanatego used the metaphor that many arrows cannot be broken as easily as one. This inspired the bundle of 13 arrows held by an eagle in the Great Seal of the United States. So in one claw, the eagle holds 13 arrows, and in the other holds the tree of life. According to C.C. Tansel, Benjamin Franklin referenced the Iroquois method of democracy in his plan for the Union in 1754, to which he invited representatives of the Iroquois. Later, he invited the Great Council members of the Iroquois to address the Continental Congress in 1776. Much of this information I have given you came from an article in Native Voices, How the Iroquois Great Law of Peace Shaped U.S. Democracy, by Terry Hansen, a Winnebago and Cherokee member. Another source, History Newsletter, says that descriptions of Native American governments appeared in John Adams' 3-volume handbook, which surveyed different types of governments and ideas about governments, along with European philosophers like John Locke and Montesquieu, whom we have been told influenced the writers of our Constitution. However, there were no contemporary democracies at the time anywhere else in the world. So when our Constitution was created, there were no other democracies anywhere in the world except the Great Law of Peace. Also, over the years, the colonists had had personal experiences with the Iroquois Confederacy and other indigenous governments. In more recent times, Orrin Lyons, who was a faith keeper for the Iroquois Confederacy, testified before the Senate Select Committee on Indian Affairs about the subject of Native American influence on the Constitution. This motivated the committee's chair, Daniel Inouye of Hawaii, to help Congress pass a 1988 resolution formally acknowledging the influence of the Iroquois Confederacy on the U.S. Constitution. We thank you, the Haudenosaunee people, for your influence on our government and for your influence in how we look upon the natural world in spiritual thanksgiving. Now I would like to share a small portion of the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address. Greetings to the natural world, the central prayer for the Haudenosaunee peoples, or the peoples of the Iroquois Confederacy. This is a daily sunrise prayer, and it opens and closes social and religious meetings. It was translated from the Mohawk by John Stokes and David Benedict, Turtle Clan Mohawk. The people. Today we have gathered and we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with one another and all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one. We give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are one. The Earth Mother. We are all grateful, thankful to our Mother, the Earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk about upon her. It gives us joy that she continues to care for us as she has from the beginning of time. To our Mother, we send greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. The waters. We give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us with strength. Water is life. We know its power in many forms: waterfalls and rain, mists and streams, rivers and oceans. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the Spirit of water. Now our minds are one. The Thanksgiving address continues, thanking the fish, the plants, the food plants, the medicine herbs, the animals, the trees, the birds, the four winds, the thunderers or grandfathers, the sun, grandmother moon, the stars, the enlightened teachers, and the Creator. Amen.
Hello. My name is AJ Fox. I use they, them pronouns. I'm too tall for this step stool. I am a white person in my mid-30s with red hair, freckles. I'm wearing some sort of like red and gray and black ensemble. And we are somewhere around halfway through the service. And if you feel like wiggling your body, I would encourage you to like stand up right now and stretch and wiggle your body, because my body needed wiggled. And I get to, because I get to stand up here. So stand up, or just stretch from where you're sitting, or make yourself move just a little. I promise we all need it. All right. All right. So I sit in a lot of conversations at this church, and I've been having a bunch of conversations surrounding Thanksgiving around here. See, there are people, activists and leaders I really respect, that are asking non-Indigenous, mostly white people, to be allies in decolonizing efforts surrounding Thanksgiving. And I'm going to explain what that means and why I keep having conversations about it. First Nations and Indigenous people have been acting for an active inspection of the myth and continued practice of Thanksgiving. Some of this myth has been actively unwoven across the last few decades. We've been seeing it and been part of it. Classrooms have received pushback when they ask elementary school students to role play pilgrims and Indians. Football teams are at least petitioned to reconsider their racist mascots and monikers as they play Thanksgiving afternoon football. And in these conversations, some of them with many of you, I keep floundering for a concise explanation of this big why, right? You're going to hear in a minute. I really like pie, and I really like gratitude, and I really like eating with people. So conceptualizing this why is hard. And spoiler alert, I'm not planning on giving up pie completely. But I share an important passage from a 2019 New Yorker article. Hey, Vonnegut, that screeching sound is helping the entire room not be able to hear. Thank you. I share no, Vonnegut, that means stop, please. Thank you. I share an important passage from the 2019 article by Philip Deloria, as in the New Yorker, right? The entire article is available online if you haven't read too many of their articles this month. The title is The Invention of Thanksgiving: Massacres, Myths, and the Making of the Great November Holiday. So this is 3 years ago. I have a printed out copy of it if anyone wants it now that I've read it and marked it up a little. But the paragraphs I'm talking about say this. They describe the initial Thanksgiving that we all know. And then it says, no centuries-long continuity emerged from that 1621 meetup. New Englanders certainly celebrated Thanksgiving, often in both fall and spring, but they were the fasting and prayer variety. Why does it keep doing that? The fasting and prayer variety. Notable examples took place in 1637 and 1676, following bloody victories over Native peoples. To mark the second occasion, and here I'm going to choose to do something that might be controversial. I'm going to omit the exact graphic nature of the Colonist Acts because they're going to stick with me after reading this article. But if you want to read it, you should go find them. But they're going to stick with you, right? They had Thanksgivings after horrific acts against the Native people. The less brutal holiday that we celebrate today took shape 2 centuries later as an effort to entrench an imagined American community. In 1841, Reverend Alexander Young explicitly linked 3 things: the 1621 rejoicing, the tradition of autumnal harvest festivals, and the name Thanksgiving. Okay, about 200 years after the 1621 meetup, Reverend Alexander Young linked those things. He did so in a 4-line throwaway gesture and a 1-line footnote. Of such half-thoughts is history made. A couple decades later, Sarah Josephia Hale, the editor of Godey's Ladies' Book, proposed a day of unity and remembrance to counter the trauma of the Civil War. And in 1863, Abraham Lincoln declared the last Thursday of November to be that national holiday, following Young's lead in calling it Thanksgiving. After the Civil War, Thanksgiving developed rituals, foodways, and themes of family and national reunion. Only later would it consolidate its narrative around a harmonious Pilgrim Wampanoag feast, as Lisa Blee and Jean O'Brien point out in Monumental Mobility, the memory work of Massasoit, which tells the story of how the holiday myth spread. Fretting over late 19th and early 20th century immigration, American mythmakers discovered that the Pilgrims and New England as a whole were a perfect cast of founding fathers: white, Protestant, Democratic, and blessed with an American character centered on family, work, individualism, freedom, and faith. And the news story aligned neatly with the defeat of American Indian resistance in the West and the rising tide of celebratory regret that the anthropologist Renato Rizaldo once called imperialist nostalgia. Glorifying the endurance of white pilgrim founders diverted attention from the brutality of rising Jim Crow and racial violence and downplayed the foundational role of African slavery in our country. The fable also allowed its audience to avert its eyes from the marginalization of Asian and Latinx labor populations, the racialization of Southern European and Eastern European immigrants, and the rise of eugenics. At Thanksgiving, white New England cheerfully shoved the problematic South and West off to the side and claimed America for itself. That's the New Yorker article. That's 4 paragraphs out of a very big article. The larger question of how we practice Thanksgiving came to be the way it was used as a tool to celebrate and actively entrench larger stories of white supremacy is a conversation that only entered my awareness in the last few years. I'm careful how I word that. Entered my awareness, because Wampanoag people have been meeting at Coles Hill in Plymouth since November 27th, 1970, to commemorate the National Day of Mourning in place of Thanksgiving. This will be the 52nd year that Wampanoag and other First Nation people have held a National Day of Mourning at Coles Hill in Plymouth. And so in conversations around Thanksgiving, I have shared with all of y'all that I'm struggling to find how to find my personal footing between appreciating a holiday that isn't entirely about stuff, that includes food and family, and honoring the, I won't even say growing because they've been saying it, but I haven't been hearing it, the voices of First Nation peoples who are directly asking us to stop practicing and entrenching Thanksgiving. And I was asked to talk about it. And then I remembered, after like fretting about it for weeks, that I created a video for this congregation that was never shared last year. And it was never shared, not because of any particular reason, but because of the time-sensitive nature of the video, combined with scheduling overlaps and Sunday services. It was just behind-the-scenes stuff. It ended up on the drive and got left there. And I made it last year. But I'll share it here today briefly, and then I'll share a caveat. And by I mean Luna will share the video.
Hello, my name is AJ Fox. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the Director of Religious Education here at First UU. Sometimes I bring us stories. Today I'm bringing us memes. Today I offer 2 building block pieces that I haven't made sense of quite myself yet, but feel like they're worth sharing in this space of conversations. If y'all know me, which many of you do, you know that I love food. I love food, I love eating food, I love sharing food. And I am a big believer in the healing power of eating together in community. So that leads us to our problem for today. The first piece I offer to you comes from a white content creator named Brian Herrick. Herrick made a comic that has been widely circulated in its entirety and also as individual images. The images I'm going to share here with you today are shared with permission from the illustrator. The comic goes like this. It is titled, Reading About Anti-Racism. And in it, Brian Herrick says, I recently saw a tweet that went something like this. Reading about anti-racism doesn't make you an anti-racist. My defensive response was immediate. Is this putting people down for reading about anti-racism? Then, wait a minute. What if I switched anti-racism with mountain climbing? Let's try it out. Reading about mountain climbing doesn't make you a mountain climber. Right, you can read about something, but then there are a whole series of actions and experiences that lead you to doing that thing. That takes expert advice, trials and error, humility, setbacks, and regular practice. Not to mention, racism is nuanced with hidden levers, built-in secrets, unwritten rules, and over 400 years of social conditioning. Crap, the word racism set me off. The point here is upsetting. I almost missed the truth of that tweet because of my white defensive response. As a white person in this culture, I need to question my defensive reactions constantly, or I am just repeating history. Brian Herrick, accessible via ebbandflood.com. Brian Herrick's point is that we need to think about the many ways of our personal biases are impacting our reactions to the world around us. And I'm going to be honest here. I've struggled with this, the reaction, the space where I am, where I have read, and where my actions are in regard to Thanksgiving. Columbus Day? Meh, throw it out. But Thanksgiving isn't just a holiday where you learn truth about yourself, you learn the truth about, and you immediately are resolved from the complexity. There are some things about Thanksgiving that I am super attached to. I like sitting down at a table once a year with a big old family. I like sitting down at a table once a year with family and the extras, the people that show up. I like eating mostly seasonally appropriate foods once in a while. I like the gratitude parts a whole lot. I like Thanksgiving. I know the horror of the history of this day. I've read the history of the ways that the holiday was created in a post-Civil War environment as propaganda and the ways that it has been weaponized and continues to be weaponized. I've read the opinions of Native people on the history and current practice of Thanksgiving. I think many of us have. Most of us have. And I have been in between the stage that Brian Herrick describes as reading about mountain climbing and mountain climbing. And this week, after eating Thanksgiving dinner at my folks' house and then driving out to visit my children's paternal grandparents, I read a post on Facebook written by Ijoma Olu. Ijoma Olu is a New York Times bestselling author who has written the books So You Want to Talk About Race and Mediocre, The Dangerous Legacy of White Male America. And here is what she posted. She posted a list of Native-owned businesses. We will make sure this content gets sent out in What's Up this week and linked. And she shared this list with this commentary. These are her words. Happy Thursday, y'all. I hope that if you are a non-Native and celebrating Thanksgiving this year, that you will consider alternatives for next year. I hope that if you are non-Native and celebrating Thanksgiving this year, that you will consider alternatives for next year. Regardless of what Thanksgiving may mean to you personally, this is a holiday steeped on the blood of Native peoples. Please take time to acknowledge the theft and genocide that this day was created to celebrate today, and do what you can to support Native folks who are still battling against the ongoing colonialist genocide today. I know that many of us love coming together with our family to celebrate each other over food. I know that many people don't have work schedules that allow them to come together at other times of the year. For my family, we have found that coming together on the Friday after Thanksgiving, tomorrow, works best. The kids are still out of school. It's often easier to get work off on Friday for those working hourly. And we can also skip the capitalist nightmare that is Black Friday. Today, we're grocery shopping, hanging out at home, and putting some extra money to @RealWint Duwamish. And that's it. That's the things that have me thinking about next year, about the way that when we make commitments a year in advance and talk to the people in our lives with lead time, it helps us to stay committed to things. And the difference between mountain climbing and reading about mountain climbing. And has me thinking about how to get my family around a table and still respect the voices of Native people. Thank you.
And here's my caveat, my addendum. As I remind myself nearly daily, against myself, the sense of urgency to do all things immediately is part of white supremacy culture, according to the models offered by Okun and Jones, and can be the undoing of progress. It has been many, many years creating this mess, and it will be many, many years uncreating it. As it turned out, my relatively progressive family needed more than 1 year to disentangle and reorganize our practices. Conversations between some of my siblings and my parents have happened over the last year, but a solid plan of how to create this space that keeps the things that we value and does not continue to entrench the things that we want to not entrench is going to hopefully be continued this week over Thanksgiving. 2023 is the year we hope to pivot from a family meal of turkey on Thanksgiving to something different. And we don't have all the answers yet, but we're hoping to create and craft a family gathering over the weekend annually that is able to hold these values. I invite each of you to consider the work of mountain climbing this Thanksgiving week and how we can do it with intentionality.